Hello everyone! I hope you're ready for another adventure! Because today, Wayne continues to read Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Always remember that as we go through these amazing stories and read these outstanding adventures, all you have to do is press the CC button in your YouTube link in order to follow along with the words. Now I think that North Star will be perfect to join us for today's adventure. Now that North Star's here, let's jump in. Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, Chapter 10, The Rogue Bludger. Since the disastrous episode with the Pixies, Professor Lockhart had not brought live creatures into class. Instead, he read passages of his books to them, and sometimes reenacted some of the more dramatic bits. He usually picked Harry to help him with his reconstructions. So far, Harry had been forced to play a simple Transylvanian villager, had cured of a babbling curse, a yeti with a head cold, and a vampire who'd been unable to eat anything except lettuce because Lockhart had dealt with him. Harry was hauled in front of the class during their very next defense against the dark arts lesson, this time acting a werewolf. If he hadn't had a very good reason for keeping Lockhart in a good mood, he would have refused to do it. Nice howl, Harry. Exactly. And then, if you'll believe it, I pounced like this, slammed him into the floor. Thus, with one hand, I managed to hold him down. With my order, I put my wand to his throat. Then I screwed up the remains of strength and performed an immensely complex Hormophus charm. He let out a piteous moan. Go on, Harry. Higher than that. Good. The fur vanished, the fangs shrank, and he sank back into a man. Simple yet effective, and another villager will remember me forever as the hero who delivered them from the monthly terror of the werewolf attacks. The bell rang and Lockhart got to his feet. Homework. Compose a poem about my defeat of the Wagga Wagga werewolf. Signed copies of the magical mead to the author of the best one. The class began to leave. Harry returned to the back of the room where Ron and Hermione were waiting. Ready? Harry muttered. Wait till everyone's gone, said Hermione nervously. All right. She approached Lockhart's desk, a piece of paper clutched tightly in her hand. Harry and Ron right behind her. Professor Lockhart, she stammered. I wanted to get this book from the library. Just for background reading, to get out. She held out a piece of paper, her hand shaking lightly. But the thing is, it's in the restricted section of the library, so I need a teacher to sign for it. I'm sure it would help me understand what you have to say about the gaddling with the ghouls, about slow-acting venoms. Ah, gadding with ghouls, said Lockhart, taking note from Hermione and smiling wildly at her. Possibly my favorite book. You enjoyed it. Oh yes, said Hermione eagerly. How you trapped the last one with a tea strainer. Well, I'm sure no one will mind me giving the best student of the year a little extra help, said Lockhart warmly, and he pulled out an enormous peacock quill. Yes, nice, isn't it? He said, misreading the revolted look on Ron's face. I usually save it for book signings. He scrawled an enormous loopy signature on the note and handed it back to Hermione. So Harry, said Lockhart, while Hermione folded the note in fumbling fingers and slipped it into the bag. Tomorrow's the first Quidditch match of the season, I believe. Gryffindor against Slytherin, is it not? I hear you're a youthful player. I was Seeker too. I was asked to try out for the national squad, but preferred to dedicate my life to the eradication of dark forces. Still, if you ever feel the need for a little private training, don't hesitate to ask. Always happy to pass on my little expertise to less able players. Harry made an indistinct noise in his throat, then hurried off after Ron and Hermione. I don't believe it, he said after the three of them examined the note. He didn't even look at the book he wanted. That's because he's a brainless git, said Ron. But who cares, we got what we needed. He's not brainless, said Hermione shrilly, as they ran half through the library. Just because he said you were the best student of the year, they dropped their voices as they entered the muffled stillness of the library. Madame Pince, the librarian, was a thin, irritable woman who looked like an unfed vulture. Moste ponte potion, she repeated suspiciously, trying to take the note from Hermione, but Hermione wouldn't let go. I was wondering if I could keep it, she said breathlessly. Oh, come on, said Ron, wrenching it from her grasp and thrusting it at Madame Pince. We'll get you another autograph. Lockhart will sign anything if it stands still long enough. Madame Pince held the note up to the light, as though determined to detect it from forgery. But it passed the test. She stalked away between the lofty shelves and returned several minutes later, carrying a large, moldy-looking book. Hermione put it carefully in her bag and they left, trying not to walk too quickly or not look too guilty. 5 minutes later, they were barricaded in Moaning Mortal's out-of-order bathroom once again. Hermione had overridden Ron's objections by pointing out that it was the last place anyone in their right minds would go, so they guaranteed some privacy. Moaning Myrtle was crying noisily in her stall, but they were ignoring her, and she them. Hermione opened Mosse Ponte Potions carefully, and the three of them bent over the damp, spotted pages. It was clear from the glance that it belonged in the restricted section. Some of the potions had effects almost too gruesome to think about, and there was an unpleasant illustration which included a man who seemed to be turned inside out, and a witch sprouting several pairs of arms from her head. "Here it is," said Hermione excitedly, as she found the page headed "The Polyjuice Potion." It was decorated with drawings of people halfway through transforming to other people. Harry sincerely hoped the artist had imagined the looks of intense pain on their faces. "This is the most complicated potion I've ever seen," said Hermione, as they scanned the recipe. "Lacewing flies, laces, floodwigs, knotgrass," she murmured, running her finger down the ingredients. "Well, they're easy enough. They're in the student store cupboard. We can help ourselves." "Ooh, look, powdered horn of bicone. Don't think that we're going to get that. Shredded skin of bumslag? That'll be tricky too. And of course, a bit of whatever we want to change into." "Excuse me," said Ron sharply. "What do you mean a bit of whoever we're changing into? I'm drinking nothing with crab's toenails in it." Hermione continued as though she hadn't heard him. "We don't have to worry about that yet, though, because we add those bits last." Ron turned speechless to Harry, who had another worry. "Do you realize how much we're going to have to steal, Hermione? Shredded skins of bloomslack, that's definitely not in the student's cupboard. What we're going to do, break into Snape's private stores? I don't know if this is a good idea." Hermione shut the book with a snap. "Well, if you two are going to chicken out, fine," she said. There were bright pink patches on her cheeks and her eyes brighter than normal. "I don't want to break the rules, you know. I think threatening Bungleborns is far worse than brewing up a difficult potion. But if you don't want to find out if it's Malfoy, I'll go straight to Madame Pince now and hand the book back, and—" "I never thought I'd see the day when you'd be persuading us to break the rules," Ron said. "All right, we'll do it. But not toenails, okay?" "How long will it take to make anyway?" said Harry, as Hermione, looking happier, opened the book again. "Well, since the Flux Week has got to be picked at the full moon and the Lacewigs have got to be stewed for 21 days, I'd say about a month, if we can get all the ingredients." "A month?" said Ron. "Malfoy could probably have taken over half the Muggle board by the school by then." But Hermione's eyes narrowed again dangerously, and she added swiftly, "But it's the best plan we've got, so full steam ahead, I'd say." However, while Hermione was checking that the coast was clear for them to leave the bathroom, Ron muttered to Harry, "It'll be a lot less hassle if you can knock out Malfoy off his broom tomorrow." Harry woke early Saturday morning and lay for a while thinking about the coming Quidditch match. He was nervous, mainly at the thought that Wood would say if Gryffindor lost, but also at the idea of facing a team mounted on the fastest racing broom's gold goodbye. He had never wanted to beat Slytherin so badly. After half an hour laying there with his sides turning, he got up, dressed, and went down to breakfast early, where he found that the rest of the Gryffindor team had huddled at the long, empty table, all looking upright and not speaking much. As 11 approached, the whole school started its way down towards the Quidditch field. It was the muggy of the day, with a hint of thunder in the air. Ron and Hermione came hurrying over to wish Harry good luck as he entered the locker rooms. The team pulled up their scarlet Gryffindor robes, then sat down to listen to Wood's usual pre-match prep talk. "Slytherin has better brooms than us," he began. "No doubt about it, but we've got better people on our brooms. We've trained harder than they have. We've been flying in all weathers." "Too true," muttered George Weasley. "I haven't been properly dry since August. And we've going to make it a rue the day they let that little bit of slime Malfoy buy his way onto the team." Just heaving with emotions, Wood turned to Harry. "It'll be down to you, Harry, to show them the Seeker has to have something more than a rich father. Get to that snitch before Malfoy does, or die trying, Harry, because we've got to win today. We've got to." "So no pressure, Harry," said Fred, winking at him. As they walked out into the pitch, a roar of noise greeted them. Mainly cheers, because Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff were anxious to see Slytherin beaten. But Slytherins in the crowd made their boos and hisses heard, too. Madam Hooch, the Quidditch teacher, asked Flint and Wood to shake hands, which they did, giving other threatening stares and gripping harder than was necessary. "On my whistle," Madam Hooch said. 3, 2, 1. With a roar from the crowd, the speed of them turned upward. The 14 players rose upwards toward the leaden sky. Harry flew higher than any of them, squinting around for the snitch. "All right there, Scarhead," Malfoy yelled, shooting underneath him as to show off the speed of his broom. Harry had no time to reply. At that moment, a heavy-backed bludger came pelting towards him. He avoided it so narrowly that it felt as a ruffle at his parrot as it passed. "Close one, Harry," said George, streaking past him with his club in his hand, ready to knock the bludger back towards the Slytherin. Harry saw George give the bludger a powerful whack in the direction of Madame Puncy, but the bludger changed direction in midair and shot straight towards Harry again. Harry dropped quickly to avoid it, and George managed to hit it right towards Malfoy. Once again, the bludger swerved like a boomerang and shot at Harry's head. Harry put on a burst of speed and zoomed towards the other end of the pitch. He could hear the bludger whistling behind him. What's going on? Bludgers never concentrated on one player like this. It's their job to try and unseat as many players as possible. Fred Weasley was waiting for the bludger at the other end. Harry ducked as Fred swung at the bludger with all his might, and the bludger was knocked off course. "Gotcha!" Fred yelled happily, but he was wrong. As though it was magnetically attracted to Harry, the bludger pelted after him. Once more, and Harry was forced to fly off at full speed. It had started to rain. Harry felt large drops fall into his face, spattering onto his glasses. He didn't have a clue what was going on at the rest of the game, until he learned Lee Jordan, who was commenting, say, "Slytherin leads 60 points to 0. The Slytherin's superior brooms were clearly doing their jobs, and meanwhile the Mad Bludger was doing all it could to knock Harry out of the air. Fred and George were now flying so close to him on either side of Harry that he could see nothing at all, except their flailing arms had no chance to look for the snitch, let alone catch it. "Someone's tampered with this bludger," Fred grunted, swinging his bat with all his might as it launched a new attack on Harry. "We need a timeout," said George, trying to signal to Wood to stop the bludger, breaking Harry's nose at that time. Wood had obviously got the message. Madame Hooch's whistle rang out, and Fred and Harry and George dived for the ground, still trying to avoid the Mad Bludger. "What's going on?" said Wood, as the Gryffindor team huddled together, while Slytherin's crowd cheered. "We're being flattened. Fred and George, where were you when that bludger stopped Angela from scoring?" "We were 20 feet above her, stopping the other bludger from murraying Harry, Oliver," said George angrily. "Someone's fixed it. It won't leave Harry alone. It hasn't gone for anyone else all game. The Slytherins must have done it, but the bludgers have been locked in Madame Hooch's office since our practice, and there's been nothing wrong with them then," Wood said anxiously. Madame Hooch was walking over to them. Over her shoulder, Harry could see the Slytherin team jeering and pointing in their direction. "Listen," said Harry as she came nearer. "With you two flying around me all the time, the only way I'm going to catch the snitch is that flies up my sleeve. Go back to the rest of the team and let me deal with the rogue one." "Don't be thick," said Harry. "It'll take off your head." Wood was looking from Harry to the Weasleys. "Oliver, this is insane," said Alicia Spinnet angrily. "You can't let Harry deal with that thing on his own. Let's ask for an inquiry." "If we stop now, we'll have to forfeit the match," said Harry. "And we're not losing the Slytherin just because of a crazy bludger. Come on, Oliver, tell them to leave me alone." "This is all your fault," said George angrily to Wood. "Get the snitch or die trying." What a stupid thing to tell him. Madame Hooch had joined them. "Ready to resume play?" she asked Wood. Wood looked at the determined look in Harry's face. "All right," he said. "Fred, George, you heard Harry. Leave him alone and let him deal with the bludger on his own." The rain was falling more heavily now. On Madame Hooch's whistle, Harry kicked off hard from the ground and heard the telltale whoosh of the bludger behind him. Higher and higher, Harry climbed. He looped and swooped, spiraled and zigzagged and rolled. Suddenly, dizzily, he nevertheless kept his eye open. Rain speckled his glasses and ran up his nostrils until he was upside down. Avoiding another fierce dive from the bludger, he could hear laughter from the crowd. He knew he looked very stupid, but the rogue bludger was so heavy, he began a kind of roller coaster ride around the edges of the stadium, squinted through the silver speech of rain as the Gryffindor goalpost, where Adam Pusey was trying to get past Wood. A whistling in Harry's ear told him the bludger had just missed him again. He turned over and sped in the opposite direction. "Training for the ballet, Potter," yelled Malfoy as Harry was forced to do a stupid kind of twirl in midair to dodge a bludger, and he fled, the bludger trailing a few feet behind him. And then, glaring back at Malfoy in hatred, he saw the snitch. It was hovering just inches above Malfoy's left ear, and Malfoy, busy laughing at Harry, hadn't seen it. For an agonizing moment, Harry hung in midair, not daring to speed towards Malfoy in case he looked up and saw the snitch. Wham! He had stayed still a second too long. The bludger had hit him at last, smashing his elbow. Harry felt his arm break. Dizzily, dazed, the searing pain in his arm, he slid sideways on his rain-drenched broom. One knee still crooked over it, his right arm dangling useless at his side. The bludger came pelting back for a second attack, this time aiming at his face. Harry swerved out of the way. One idea lodged firmly into his brain. Get to Malfoy. Through the haze of rain and pain, he dived for the shivering, staring face behind him, saw its eyes widen in fear. Malfoy thought Harry was attacking him. "What the?" he gasped, careening out of Harry's way. Harry took his remaining hand off the broom, made a wild snatch, felt his fingers close on the cold snitch, but was now only gripping the broom with his legs. And there was a yell from the crowd as though he headed straight for the ground, trying not to pass out. With a splattering thud, he hit the mud and rolled off his broom. His arm was hanging off at a very distinct angle. Riddled in pain, he heard, as though from a distance, a good deal of whistling and shouting. He focused on the snitch clutched in his good hand. "Aha," he said vaguely. "We've won." He fainted. He came around, rain falling on his face, still lying on the field with Sun leaning over him. He saw a glitter of teeth. "Oh no, not you," he moaned. "Doesn't know what he's saying," said Lockhart loudly to the anxious crowd of Gryffindors pressing around them. "Not to worry, Harry. I'm about to fix your arm." "No!" said Harry. "I'll keep it like this, thanks." He tried to sit up, but the pain was terrible. He heard a familiar clicking noise nearby. "I don't want a photo of this, Colin," he said loudly. "Lie back, Harry," said Lockhart soothingly. "It's a simple charm. I've used it countless times." "Why can't I go to the hospital wing?" said Harry through clenched teeth. "You should really, Professor," said a muddy Wood, who couldn't help grinning even though the secret was injured. "Great capture, Harry. Really spectacular. Your best yet, I'd say." Through the thickest of legs around him, Harry spotted Fred and George Weasley wrestling the rogue Bludger into a box. It was still putting up a terrific fight. "Stand back," said Lockhart, who was rolling up his jade sleeves. "No, don't," said Harry weakly, but Lockhart was twirling his wand, and a second later, he had directed it straight at Harry's arm. A strange, unpleasant sensation started at Harry's shoulder and spread all the way down to his fingertips. It felt as though his arm had been deflated. He didn't dare look at what happened. He shut his eyes. He turned his face away from his arm. But his worst fears were realized as the people above him gasped. Colin Creevey began clicking away madly. His arm didn't hurt anymore, nor did it feel remotely like an arm. "Ah, yes," said Lockhart. "Well, that can sometimes happen. But the point is, the bones are no longer broken. The thing to bear in mind. So, Harry, just toddle up to the hospital wing, huh? Mr. Weasley, Madam Granger, would you escort him? And Madam Pomfrey would be able to, tidy this up a bit." As Harry got back to his feet, he felt strangely lopsided. Taking a deep breath, he looked down to his right arm. What he saw literally made him pass out. Poking at the end of his robes, what made him look like a large, thick, fleshy covered rubber tube. He tried to move his fingers. Nothing happened. Lockhart hadn't mended Harry's bones. He had removed them. Madame Pomfrey wasn't at all pleased. "You should have come straight to me," she raged, holding up the sad limp of remainder of what, half an hour before, had been a working arm. "I can mend bones in a second, but growing them back?" "You will be able to, won't you?" said Harry desperately. "I'll be able to, certainly, but it will be painful," said Madame Pomfrey grimly, throwing Harry a pair of pajamas. "You'll have to stay the night." Hermione waited outside as the curtain was drawn around Harry's bed while Ron helped him into his pajamas. It took a while to stuff the rubbery, boneless arm into the sleeve. "How can you stick off for Lockhart now, Hermione, eh?" Ron called through the curtain as he pushed Harry's limp fingers through the cuff. If Harry wanted deboning, he would have asked. "Anyone can make a mistake," said Hermione. "And it doesn't hurt anymore, does it, Harry?" "No," said Harry, getting into bed, "but it doesn't do anything else either." As he swung himself into bed, his arm flapped pointlessly. Hermione and Madame Pomfrey came around the curtain. Madame Pomfrey was holding a large bottle of something labeled Skelegro. "You're in for a rough night," she said, pouring out a steaming beakerful and handing it to him. "Regrowing bones is a nasty business." So it was taking Skelegro. It burned Harry's mouth and throat as it went down, making him cough and sputter. Still tut-tuttering about the dangerous spots of inept teachers, Madame Pomfrey retreated, leaving Ron and Hermione to help Harry gulp down some water. "We won, though," said Ron, a grin breaking his face. "That was some catch you made." Malfoy's face. He looked ready to kill. "I wanted to know how he fixed that Bludger," said Hermione darkly. "We can add that to the list of questions we'll ask him when we've taken the Polyjuice potion," said Harry, sinking back into his pillows. "I hope it tastes better than this stuff." "If it's got bits of Slytherin in it, you've got to be joking," said Ron. The door for the hospital wing burst open at that moment. Filthy and soaking wet, the rest of the Gryffindors had arrived to see Harry. "Unbelievable flying," Harry said George. "I've just seen Marcus Flint yelling at Malfoy. Something about having the snitch on top of his head not noticing. Malfoy didn't seem too happy." They had brought cakes, sweets, and bottles of pumpkin juice. They'd gather around Harry's bed and were just starting what promised to be a good party when Madame Pomfrey came storming over, shouting, "This boy needs rest. He's gotten 33 bones to grow. Out! Out!" Harry was left alone, with nothing to distract him from the stabbing pains in his limp arm. Hours and hours later, Harry woke suddenly with a pinch of blackness and felt a sharp yelp of pain. His arm now felt full of large splinters. For a second, that was what he thought had woken him, and then with a shrill of horror, he realized that someone was sponging his forehead in the dark. "Get off," he said loudly, then, "Dobby?" The house elf's goggling tennis ball's eyes were peering at Harry through the darkness, a single tear running down his long pointed nose. "Harry Potter came back to school," he whispered miserably. "Dobby warned Harry Potter. Ah, sir, why didn't you hear Dobby? Why didn't Harry Potter go back home when he missed the train?" Harry heaved himself on his pillows and pushed Dobby's sponge away. "What are you doing here, and how do you know I missed the train?" Dobby's lip trembled, and Harry had seized by a sudden suspicion. "It was you," he said slowly. "You stopped the barrier from letting us through. Indeed, sir, said Dobby, nodding his head vigorously, his ears flapping. Dobby hid and watched for Harry Potter and sealed the gateway, and Dobby had to iron his own hands afterwards. He showed Harry 10 long, bandaged fingers. But Dobby didn't care, sir, for he thought Harry was safe, and never did Dobby dream that Harry Potter would get to school another way. He was rocking backward and forward, shaking his ugly head. Dobby was so shocked when he heard Harry Potter was back at Hogwarts, he let his master's dinner burn. Such a flogging Dobby never had, sir. You nearly got Ron and me expelled, he said fiercely. You had better get lost before my bones grow back, Dobby, or I might strangle you. Dobby smiled weakly. Dobby is used to death threats, sir. Dobby gets them 5 times a day at home. He blew his nose on the corner of a filthy pillow he wore, looking so pathetic that Harry felt his anger ebb in spite of himself. Why'd you even wear that thing, Dobby? He asked curiously. This, sir, said Dobby, plucking at the pillowcase. 'Tis a mark of a house elf's enslavement, sir. Dobby can only be freed if his masters present him with clothes. The family is careful not to pass Dobby even a sock, sir, for then he would be free to leave their house forever. Dobby mopped his bulging eyes, and then suddenly, Harry Potter must go home. Dobby thought his bludger would be enough to make... Your bludger? Said Harry, anger rising once more. What do you mean, your bludger? You made that bludger try to kill me? Not you, sir. Never kill you, said Dobby, shocked. Dobby wants to save Harry Potter's life. Better be sent home, grievously injured, than remain here, sir. Dobby only wanted Harry Potter to be hurt enough to be sent home. Oh, is that all? Said Harry angrily. I don't suppose you're going to tell me why you want me sent home in pieces. Ah, if Harry Potter only knew, Dobby groaned, more tears welling up in his pillowcase. If he knows what he means to us, to the lowly, to the enslaved, we are dregs of the magical world. Dobby remembers how it was when he who must not be named was at the height of his power, sir. We house elves were treated like vermin, sir. Of course, Dobby is still treated like that, sir, he admitted, drying his face on the pillowcase. But mostly, sir, life was improved for my kind since you triumphed over he who must not be named. Harry Potter survived, and the Dark Lord's power was broken, and it was a new dawn, sir. And Harry Potter should be shown a beacon of hope for those of us who thought the dark days would never end. And now, at Hogwarts, terrible things are perhaps happening already. Can stay here now that history is to repeat itself, now that the Chamber of Secrets is open once more. Dobby froze horror-struck, then he grabbed Harry's water jug from the bedside table and cracked it over his own head, toppling out of sight. A second later, he crawled back onto the bed, cross-eyed muttering, "Bad Dobby. Very bad, Dobby." He seized the elf's bony wrist as Dobby inched towards the water jug. But I'm not muggle-born. How can I be in danger of the chamber? Ah, sir, ask no more. Ask no more of poor Dobby, stammered the elf, his eyes huge in the dark. Dark deeds are planned in this place, but Harry Potter must not be here when they happen. Go home, Harry Potter, go home. Harry Potter must not meddle in this. It's too dangerous, sir. Who is it, Dobby? Harry said, keeping a firm hold on Dobby's wrist to stop him from hitting himself with the water jug again. Who's opened it? Who's opened it last time? Dobby can't say, sir. Dobby can't. Dobby mustn't, squealed the house elf. Go home, Harry Potter, go home. I'm not going anywhere, Harry said fiercely. One of my best friends is muggle-born. She'll be the first in line when the chamber is really opened. Harry risked his own life for his friends, moaned Dobby, in such a kind and miserable ecstasy. So noble, so valiant, but he must save himself. He must. Harry Potter must not. Dobby suddenly froze, his bat ears quivering. Harry heard it too. There were footsteps coming down the passageway. Dobby must go, breathed the house elf, terrified. There was a loud crack as Harry's fist was suddenly clenched in the air. He slumped back into his bed, his eyes on the dark door of the hospital wing, footsteps coming nearer. Next moment, Dumbledore was backing into the dormitory wearing a long, woolly dressing gown and a nightcap. He was carrying one end of what looked like a statue. Professor McGonagall appeared a second later, carrying his feet. Together they heaved him into bed. Get Madame Pomfrey, whispered Professor Dumbledore, and Professor McGonagall hurried past the end of Harry's bed out of sight. Harry lay still, pretending to be asleep. He heard urgent voices, and then Professor McGonagall swept back into view, closely followed by Madame Pomfrey, who was pulling a cardigan over her nightdress. He heard a sharp breath of intake. What happened, Madame Pomfrey whispered to Dumbledore, bending over the statue of the bed. Another attack, said Dumbledore. Minerva found him on the stairs. There was a bunch of grapes next to him, said Professor McGonagall. We think he was trying to sneak up here to visit Potter. Harry's stomach gave a lurch. Slowly and carefully, he raised himself a few inches so that he could see the statue on the bed. A ray of moonlight lit across the staring face. It was Colin Creevey. His eyes were wide and hands were stuck in front of him, holding his camera. Petrified, whispered Madame Pomfrey. Yes, said McGonagall. But I shudder to think, if Alphys hadn't been in the doorway for hot chocolate, who knows what might have... The three of them stared down at Colin. Then Dumbledore leaned forward and wrenched the camera out of Colin's grip. You don't think he managed to get a picture of his attacker, said Professor McGonagall eagerly. Dumbus didn't answer. He opened the back of his campus. Good gracious, said Madame Pomfrey. A steam of jet hissed out of the camera. Harry, 3 beds away, caught the acrid smell of burnt plastic. Melted, said Madame Pomfrey, said wonderingly. All melted. What does this mean, Albus? Professor McGonagall asked generally. It means, said Dumbledore, the Chamber of Secrets is indeed open. Madame Pomfrey clapped her hand over her mouth. Professor McGonagall stared at Dumbledore. But Albus, surely who? The question is not who, said Dumbledore, his eyes on Colin. The question is how. And from what Harry could see of Professor McGonagall's shadow's face, she didn't understand this any better than he did. Oh wow, that's a pretty crazy place to end today's story. What do you think, North Star? I like that part too. We'll see you on the next adventure, okay? And we'll see you on the next adventure, here with Wayne Reads. Thank you for joining us, and we can't wait to see you again. Bye-bye!